But I really wanted a book for product makers. That's what I needed in my own life. I could see that as the interface was shrinking, as we went from desktop to laptop to mobile devices to wearable devices and now to auditory devices like Amazon Alexa, as the screen got smaller, the importance of habits would increase. But artificial intelligence gets confused for artificial consciousness. And to be very clear, we are nowhere near artificial consciousness, like not even close. Let me be very clear. There will be a disaster. Okay, I'm going to say it right here on your show. There will be a Hindenburg moment with AI. Undoubtedly.
Hello, everyone. I have Nir with me. He's a really good friend and somebody who introduced the model of hook to the world, which is largely taking some of the biggest secrets of world's tech giants and telling it to everybody else to make them realize what are their behavioral patterns and how are companies taking advantage of it, right? I read Hooked, and it was a moment of self-realization for me, made me realize how hooked I was, right? And then he went on to write Indistractable, which really helped us get tools, really, to fight against some of the biggest tech giants. Nir is one of the biggest authors, or one of my favorites as well. His work has been a bestseller for a long time, and he's also somebody who has not just given out these secrets, but also is one of the favorite authors of most of the product managers in the world. Welcome, Nir. So excited to have you today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that very kind introduction. Thank you.
I have so many questions. I don't know how I'm going to cover all of them in a single hour, but would love to get started with what really prompted you to, take some of the biggest secrets of tech giants. And our mutual friend, Ryan, is also a co-author with Hooked. Quick shout out to him. But what really made you get started there?
So I had sold my previous company, and I was looking to start another company. And I could see that at the time, this was around 2012, I could see that as the interface was shrinking, as we went from desktop to laptop to mobile devices to wearable devices and now to auditory devices like Amazon Alexa, as the screen got smaller, the importance of habits would increase. Why? Because there's just less real estate. There's just less place to trigger people with visual cues. So if you're not on that home screen of someone's phone and they haven't formed a habit, your product might as well not even exist, because if they don't remember to use it, you're dead. So I wanted to learn how to build habits through products, and I didn't find any book on how to do it. So I started researching and writing my own work. I found a lot of stuff on personal habits, but it turns out that the stuff around personal habits and how to exercise more and eat right, stuff like that is nice. But I really wanted a book for product makers. That's what I needed in my own life. So I started researching and writing and talking to my former clients and professors at Stanford and reading a lot of research studies. And then after a few years of blogging about this stuff, I coalesced everything into a bunch of blog posts that Ryan Hoover actually helped me make into what I thought would be a small PDF. Well, it turned out to be like a 250-page PDF because of all the writing I'd done. And then I decided to self-publish it, and at first, and then I got the attention of some bigger publishers, and today it's published by Portfolio, which is a division of Penguin. And and that's what I've been doing since. And I thought I was going to start another tech company, but then I discovered that I could do the things I really liked, which is focus on product without a lot of the stuff I wasn't very good at and didn't like. Being a CEO, I didn't like people issues and firing and hiring. I'm just not very good at that and don't really want to be good at it. So I really enjoy what I do now, because I get to do the best part of what I liked about being at a startup, which is working on product to improve people's lives.
Talking about Hooked a bit more, right? Like tech products, of course, like they've really hacked our brains, right? And something deeper about this is more like understanding behavioral design and those patterns, right? Like what is it that you learned about those behaviors of consumers, which, we may not realize?
Well, it sounds really sinister the way you say it, but I don't think it's anywhere near that sinister. Look, I know all their tricks. I know all their tactics. I know how they get you hooked. I wrote the book Hooked, and I will say the tactics are good. They're not that good, right?
Oh, sure.
Which is a big reason why I wrote Indistractable. What we need to do is to encourage people to use these tactics, to use these psychological principles to build the kind of products that people use because they want to, not because they have to. While some products we want to get hooked to, right? We want to get hooked to the product that helps us exercise and learn a new language and helps us be more productive at work. That's great. Like, I think it's unethical if you have the capability to build those type of products. It's unethical if you don't build those kind of products, because we need you to get in there, get your hands hands dirty and use these principles to change people's lives. The other types of products, they're not the same products. The media type products, social media, television, like these type of products, people overuse.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to do with your time is fine, as long as you do it with intent, right? As long as you do it according to your values, not someone else's.
You mentioned the hooked model can also be used for a lot of other things. In like the most fundamental way, what is the hooked model? And what are some of the most unconventional places have you seen this model being used?
If your product is the kind of product that needs repeat engagement, right? If you need people to come back to your product unprompted and you don't want to spend tons of money on advertising and spammy messages, well, then you got to build a habit. And so that's the kind of industries where you see the hook model. And what is the hook model, to answer your question? It's a 4-step process that connects the user's problem to your product with enough frequency to form a habit. So every hook has 4 steps: trigger, action, reward, and investment. And it's through successive cycles through these hooks that our preferences are shaped, that our tastes are formed, and that these habits take hold.
What's like one product that you've been hooked on to, which you were really upset about, and how did you come out of it?
Oh, okay. So email is the mother of habit-forming technology because it has a beautiful hook. Then it
I
has
did
all
not
the
expect that answer.
Email, yeah, I
That's
would say
awesome.
email. It's because we get habituated to, the mind is a cognitive miser. It looks for the path of least resistance. And so for a lot of people, thinking is hard work. For all of us, thinking is hard work. And so what many of us get habituated to is, I don't really want to think about what my priorities are. I don't really want to think about the big, hairy, audacious goals that I have and how I accomplish them and why I'm failing in some areas and I need to look at myself in the mirror. That sucks. That's no fun, right? So let me just check email. Email tells me what to do with my day. I don't have to think. I don't have to prioritize. Just look at email and email will tell me what to do with my life. And that's a trap. That's a really bad trap because essentially your to-do list becomes your email inbox. Other people are telling you what to do, and what you end up doing, you do the easy stuff. You do the urgent stuff. You don't do the hard and important work you have to do to move your life and your career forward. So to me, that was a very important bad habit to break, was this instinct to constantly check email to make sure there's no fires. And it was all in my head, right? And across the board, it's all in all of our heads. We think, oh, we constantly need to check. Our customers might need us. Our boss might need us. 99.9% of the time, it's nothing. It can wait a half an hour until you finish your work block. So that's one thing that that's one of many distractions that I had to fight.
I'm a culprit. I have to admit, I'm a culprit myself. I take pride in using emails all the time and responding in seconds.
And look, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, between X hour and Y hour, I'm going to be on email. That's exactly what you should do. You should put time in your schedule. Even if it's, hey, every hour on the hour, I'm going to spend 15 minutes checking for messages. That's fine. What I want people to do is to plan with intent. Put that time on your calendar. We see time and time again, people, Mark Andreessen famously talked about how he doesn't keep a schedule. Whatever needs to happen will happen. And people used to, when I published Indistractable, people would say, oh, look, Mark Andreessen, he's so successful. He doesn't keep a schedule. And I was so happy. I was so vindicated because about a year ago, he said, I failed. It doesn't work. I have to keep a schedule. And so now he published what his schedule looks like. It's the only way. Like, unless you're a child or retired, you need to keep a schedule, because how can you say you got distracted unless you know what you got distracted from?
That makes so much sense. What got you into, writing Indistractable?
So for me, it was a particular moment with my daughter. We had one afternoon planned, just daddy-daughter time. And I remember we had this activity book of different things that dads and daughters could do together. And one of the activities in this book was to ask each other this question, that if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember that question verbatim, but I can't tell you what my daughter said. Because in that moment, I thought, oh, there's just this one thing I got to do on my phone real quick, honey, one minute. And by the time I looked up from my device, she was gone. Because I was sending a very clear message that whatever's on my phone was more important than she was. And she went to go play with some toy outside. So that's when I really had to reassess my relationship with distraction.
And I remember we were chatting about how you have been teaching your daughter how to commit to something and just finish it, no matter what it is. And how is that going? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'm so curious to know.
Great. Yeah, I have a teenager now. She's grown up quite a bit in the past few years, and we practice what we preach. And I think it's important too. I show her where I'm struggling. Who doesn't struggle with distraction today? I still struggle with distraction, because remember, the definition of becoming indistractable is not someone who never gets distracted. That a distractible person understands why they got distracted so they can do something about it in the future. So Paulo Coelho had a wonderful quote. He said, "A mistake repeated more than once is a decision."
Wow.
So this is exactly what we teach our daughter. So she's homeschooled, so she can make her own calendar essentially. And so it's absolutely critical that she knows how to be indistractable, because there's no way to homeschool yourself if you can't focus on your studies. So we absolutely try and practice what we preach, and to teach our daughter this most important skill.
That's incredible. I also know you mentioned that she ended up taking up an internship and finished 3 months worth of work in a week.
2 weeks
2 weeks.
of
Okay.
work and work.
Still pretty good, right?
Yeah, I'm super proud. So I have to brag for a minute. She finished. She's probably one of the youngest people to have the Google Data Analyst certification. It took her like 6 months to do it. She finished that. She's a certified Python engineer. She just broke the world record for most backflips on a trampoline.
Whoa.
Yeah, she got the certificate from
incredible.
Guinness World Records and everything. Like, and it's not that she's like super genius or it's just that she does what she says she's going to do.
And just so everybody knows, she's 15, right?
Yeah, she just turned 15 last week.
For parents, right? Like this, something you're doing is definitely right. What would you
No, thanks.
advise? Any advice for parents to, like help out with kids? I know you talk about that in your book as well. Anything
Yeah,
do you want to mention particularly?
So two things. Number one, the most important thing you can do if you want to raise indistractable kids is to be an indistractable parent. And I know a lot of parents don't want to hear that. So you cannot be a hypocrite. Kids come installed with these invisible antennae, and they're constantly searching for when you are being a hypocrite. So if you want to raise indistractable kids, you got to be indistractable yourself. Okay? You have to learn these tactics and show your kids that you're struggling and you're working on this as well. That's very, very important. Then we have to understand why kids are really getting distracted. And so I talk about in the book these psychological nutrients, and how when kids don't receive enough of these psychological nutrients offline, they look for them online. This is called the needs displacement hypothesis. And so this should be required reading. Every parent needs to know what psychological nutrients kids need. We all think about vitamins and minerals, right? Macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, fat. We need those for our bodies. Turns out our brains need these 3 psychological nutrients, and they're competency, autonomy, and relatedness. And it turns out that kids across the world are suffering from a deficiency in these 3 psychological nutrients. So it is not because of social media. I don't think that kids are more depressed and suicidal. That is wrong. It's because they are deficient in psychological nutrients. The use of technology and social media is a symptom of the problem.
Gotcha.
That's super, super important. We have to understand what psychological vitamins our kids need, and then making sure that we're providing those vitamins in the offline world, so they're not constantly looking for them in the online world.
That makes so much sense. And also, like kids are programmed to copy whoever they see. What are like the 4 strategies which they can use to really start their journey towards becoming indistractable?
Sure. So it starts with understanding what is distraction. That if you ask most people what is the opposite of distraction, they'll tell you it's focus. But that's not exactly right. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. Of course it is, right? They're opposites, traction and distraction. Both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action, reminding us that distraction is not something that happens to us. It is an action that we ourselves take. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, towards your values, towards becoming the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of traction, distraction, is any action that pulls you further away from what you said you were going to do, further away from your goals, further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So the first step is understanding what is the difference between traction and distraction. So that's all about intent, deciding in advance what you want to do with your time. Then we have what's called the triggers. Now we have internal triggers and we have external triggers. When people think about distraction, they mostly think about external triggers, the pings, the dings, the rings, all these things in our outside environment that can lead us towards distraction. But studies find that's only 10% of the cause. Only 10% of the time we get distracted is because of something in our outside environment, these external triggers. 90% of the time we get distracted is because of what's happening inside of us. It's because of emotions, boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety. This is the source of 90% of our distractions. So now we can just go through these 4 points. Step number 1, master the internal triggers, or they will become your master. Step number 2, make time for traction. Step number 3, hack back the external triggers. And step number 4, prevent distraction with PACT. And it's through these 4 steps that anyone can become indistractable.
How does this affect people's relationships? And I think like this is the least talked about thing, that being distracted actually affects your relationships, right? Like you're
Totally,
not really in the
totally.
present.
And I'm telling you, as a parent who is seeing the sands of time slip away, that is not how you want to spend the time, the limited time you have with your kids. You don't want to
Yeah.
be at the dinner table and everybody's on their devices. There's a time and a place for it. When we travel and my kid's on an airplane, go for it. What are
Yeah.
we going to do anyway? We can't talk. It's too loud. Sure, use the hell out of a device. But the dinner table is a sacred place, right? That's a place to connect with your kids. And in fact, studies find that parents who have meals with their children have children with less psychological issues, lower rates of obesity, lower rates of eating disorders, because there's that connection. That's that time to connect with your kids. So I think defining for yourself what that time with your family should look like and putting it on your calendar. So many of us, we give our most important relationships whatever scraps of time are left over. Women have a much easier time of keeping those relationships. But men, something like, what is it, 80% of suicides are men? And a big part of that is because men don't keep these social relationships, because friendships don't die, they starve to death. Very few of our friendships, if you think about the people in your life that you're no longer in touch with, that you miss, it's probably not because you had a big fight, right? It's especially with guys. It's not because you said, "Oh, I don't want to talk to you anymore. You're mean." No, it's because a week went by and that became a month, that became a year, and oh, it's kind of awkward now if I reach out of the blue, because if we were really friends, we would have kept in touch. So that's what happens. They starve to death. So the antidote to that is to plan that time. And this is a big part of having these indistractable relationships that I talk about in the book. So one thing I did, I have these three really close friends from college, and this started to happen. We kind of drifted apart because I'm in Singapore, one's in LA, one's in Washington. And so I told them, when I was doing this research, I said, look, I value our relationship, and I don't like having to plan every time we talk to each other. Hey, let's get something on the calendar. How about this date? No, how about that? We play this email ping pong game. So I said, for each of them, let's book a time from now until forever. So with Travis, it's the third Tuesday of the month, and with Jeff, it's the first Wednesday or whatever it is.
Wow.
We have that time on the calendar forever. It's on the calendar, and if something comes up, okay, no problem. I text them, hey, I can't do it this week. We'll do it next time, no problem. But we have that set time in our calendar. I do the same with my wife. I do the same with my daughter. I do the same with my parents. Because if these relationships are important, we have to hold time for them. They won't just happen. They will starve unless we invest in them.
This is incredible. Like consciously making sure that we invest our time. And I think this was totally life changing. That relationships
appreciate it.
don't
Good,
die,
good.
they starve to death.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
definitely improved my life in
wow.
many, many ways.
No, that's absolutely incredible. Awesome. Let's talk about what's the road ahead for you. I mean, I absolutely loved reading both the books. What
you.
goes into being an author, and I'd love to get back to what sucks about being a CEO. I have a bunch of complaints myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just we forget how good you have to be at so many different things. There's just some things that I don't want to get better at. They're just not. But if I ever did start a company in the future, which I might, I'm still relatively young. If I do, then I might have to learn those skills.
What's your opinion on AI? Like, if you had to build a company today?
Well, let's. I'm a big word nerd, and I don't like the term AI
Okay.
because if we called, if the term AI was never invented, and we just called
Uh-huh.
it machine learning, we wouldn't even be talking about this because it sounds so much more boring. But artificial intelligence gets confused for artificial consciousness, and to be very clear, we are nowhere near artificial consciousness, not even close.
Yeah.
Let me be very clear. There will be a disaster. Okay, I'm going to say it right here on your show. There will be a Hindenburg moment with AI, undoubtedly, because the way we innovate is, when we can see the foreseeable consequences, we act in accordance, right? We find ways to prevent the harm when the harm is obvious. But by definition, these unforeseen harms are unforeseen. We have to experience them. Now, this is a delicate dance. If there is a non-zero chance for AI destroying the world, it's that the problem caused, the glitch, the Hindenburg disaster accident, is so bad that we can't recover from it. And that could happen. There is a
Wow.
non-zero chance that could happen. But it's not going to be in the way people think. Because it
For sure.
never is the way that people think. Because if you can think about it, you'll act to prevent it by definition. So it's like Sophocles, the Greek philosopher, said, "Nothing vast enters the life of mortals without a curse." There will be curses, absolutely, but they're never foreseen curses. And so we're going. It's very easy, I think, for a lot of people to sound super smart when they're pessimists, and it drives me crazy because you can make a lot of money, you can get a lot of attention by saying the sky is falling. Right? Everybody freaks out when they hear Chicken Little. Nobody listens to the person that says, okay, we're going to have problems. It's going to be a bumpy road, but there's a lot of benefits too. And let's talk about the nuance and let's have a reasonable conversation. Nobody wants to freaking listen to that guy. We need to be very aware of the motives of all forms of media, whether it's social media or traditional media, in freaking us the fuck out. That's what they do. And don't just blame it on social media. All these media companies are in the exact same business. It doesn't mean that news is bad. It means that we need to be very critical of our media diet, read more books, fewer sensational headlines, and look for wisdom, not just information.
It almost feels like our bodies are a big bag of chemicals and everything around us, movies, news, everything is just playing with those chemicals, right? And if you're not conscious about who we let to play with our chemicals, we are probably, like putting our bodies in a bad shape.
Yeah, and on one hand, that's an incredible blessing, right? This is the first time in human history where so many people have leisure time. I mean, think about it. For 200,000 years of human history, there was no such thing as leisure. Like you were hunting or gathering or fighting or plowing or taking care of the sick your entire life. That's what you did. And you prayed to the gods because you couldn't figure out why things happened. You had no conception of microbes. You have no conception of all kinds of things that made you sick. You were praying that somebody would heal you from some kind of supernatural power because you had no power. So this is an incredibly luxurious place that we're in right now, that we have, for the first time in history, more people dying of an excess of calories because of obesity than of starvation. That has never happened in the history of mankind, ever. But instead, our natural instinct is to freak out and talk about all the bad because it's difficult. It is hard. It's much easier to live in a world where you're told what to do all day, or even easier, to live in a fantasy world that you think used to exist. So what do? We think, oh, back in the good old days, it was easier. No, it wasn't. It was never. What are you talking about? What time in history was easier? There's struggles. There will always be suffering in the world. There will always be struggles. But this is a time where we have more agency than ever and more people who tell us we're powerless. And I think that's the real problem. If there's one message I wish I could get out there, is that you are far more powerful than you think. That the only people who are powerless are people who think they're powerless. Because as Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you can't, it's true.
If you had the opportunity to have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, so for me, it's the power to be indistractable. Indistractable is meant to sound like indestructible, right? I made up the word. It's meant to sound like an identity. And I want everyone, if you've made it this far in the podcast, you can proudly call yourself indistractable.
That's incredible. Oh, thank you so much for doing this. I have one last question before we sign off, Nir. Looking at next 50 years, right, the way the world is progressing, I mean, we have nuclear fusion, some breakthroughs there. We have superconductor.
Yeah, I saw that. Super cool.
And there are a bunch of people working on longevity as well. Do you think you're going to live 150 years or more, probably?
Even if I'm not, this goes back to this concept of locus of control. So we know that people who have an internal locus of control rather than an external locus of control, people who believe that they control their future versus their environment controls them, they live longer, they have more friends, they're wealthier, they do better on every conceivable metric. And so one of the lessons I learned from this psychology research is that it pays to believe in what you want, even if it's not true. So even if I'm not going to live to 150, I damn well believe I am, because why wouldn't I? Right? Exactly. I want to act as if I'm going to live that long, so I take care of my body today so it can last. I eat right. I build good relationships. I take care of my health. I want to do those things because that's the path I want to take. So
for sure,
yes, I'm definitely going to live to be 150 plus.
And the probability is higher than ever, right?
Yeah, that's true. Every day I live, and the probabilities go up.
Awesome. No, super cool. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. I hope our listeners here also come back after 100 years when we do the 100-year anniversary of
that sounds
podcast.
Great. Deal. Let's book it.
Yeah, 100%. Let's put it on the calendar. But thank you so much. If our viewers want to connect anywhere, they should reach out to you with
Yeah.
stories, with questions.
Sure. My website is nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name, Nir and far.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, everybody who made it till here. You are Indistractable, and thank you for watching us. And thank you so much, Nir, for taking our time. I know it's late in Singapore, but it was so awesome catching up. I had a bunch of more questions. Maybe next time I see you, I'll try to go through them. But
Sounds
thank you
good.
so much for taking our time. It was a pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure. Thank you.